It was a heavy August afternoon, with dark clouds covering the Washington, D.C. sky like an omen. The storm was about to begin, but inside the White House, something far darker was about to unfold. President Donald Trump, accompanied by a small group of advisors, was being led through cold, dimly lit corridors in the lower levels of the building. The concrete walls seemed to absorb the sound of their footsteps, creating a claustrophobic atmosphere. Every metallic door they passed had complex access codes, and the security personnel patrolling the area didn't exchange a single word. For Trump, mystery was nothing new, but this underground environment was beyond anything he had ever seen. Trump had always been a man of political games, someone who understood the power of secrets, but this was different. His advisors spoke little, and the silence was beginning to unsettle him. Observing the tense faces around him, he realized that what was about to happen wasn't just another political maneuver. The group's leader, a thin man with small glasses and an impassive expression, stopped in front of a massive steel door. There was something about his posture that exuded authority, but also a hidden concern. "Mr. President, this is it," he said, his voice cold and mechanical. Trump frowned. He disliked surprises, and this situation seemed to be precisely that. The door opened with a sound reminiscent of a cave being uncovered, and the metallic smell of the air invaded his nostrils. Inside, the environment was vast, almost cavernous, but lit only by rows of neon lights that gave the space a greenish glow. The walls were lined with tubes and cables, suggesting advanced technology hidden in plain sight. Trump paused for a moment, his eyes adjusting to the dim light as his mind tried to process what he was seeing. "What exactly is this?" he asked, irritation masking his growing anxiety. His advisors didn't respond, merely gesturing for him to keep walking. As he advanced, Trump realized that this place wasn't just a secret room. It was an underground complex, as if another White House were hidden beneath the surface. At the far end, he saw figures moving, but they weren't security personnel or ordinary staff. Their silhouettes seemed wrong, their movements too fluid, as if they weren't entirely human. Trump felt a chill run down his spine, but kept his expression firm. "This isn't what I was expecting," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. The silence remained heavy, broken only by the hum of the machinery. Finally, they reached a second door, even larger and more intimidating than the first. There was something menacing about the way it stood there, sealing off whatever was important enough to remain hidden. The group leader stopped again and turned to Trump. "Mr. President, what you're about to see will change your perspective on the world," he said, with a calmness that seemed rehearsed. Trump raised an eyebrow, his natural skepticism taking over. He was about to speak, but the man was already entering a code into the door. As it began to open slowly, a more intense green light escaped the room, flooding the corridor. The atmosphere felt heavier, and Trump realized the air inside was slightly different. A strange, metallic, and damp aroma hit his nostrils, as if the room itself had its own ecosystem. He hesitated for a moment before stepping in, but his instincts told him not to show weakness, even in the face of the unknown. His advisors stayed behind, leaving him to enter alone. When Trump finally crossed the threshold, he felt as though he had crossed an invisible line, leaving behind everything he knew as reality. What he would find inside would forever change not just his presidency, but his perception of the world and his place in it. Trump entered the room with firm but cautious steps, his eyes scanning every detail of the environment. The place resembled something out of a technological nightmare. Machines blinking with lights that seemed to pulse like a living breath, tubes connected to the ceiling and floor emitting cold vapor. At the center of the hall was a circular table with a surface that appeared to be made of an unknown metallic alloy, glowing with a ghostly green hue. The president took in everything, but he wasn't easily impressed. His steady gaze and unshakable expression concealed his growing distrust. Then he saw them, three figures emerging from the shadows, tall, slender, and unmistakably inhuman. The reptilian creatures were terrifying, but in a silent, calculated way. Their scaly skin bore shades of green and gray, faintly reflecting the room's light. Their eyes were slitted and gleaming, resembling those of predators lying in wait, and their movements were too fluid, almost supernatural. One of them, larger and with an air of authority, stepped forward, staring at Trump with an unsettling curiosity. "Mr. President," the creature hissed, its voice resonating both in the air and in Trump's mind, "we finally meet." The tension in the air was almost tangible, and Trump needed all his composure to hide the discomfort he felt. The reptilian leader was clearly the spokesperson. It seemed to measure every movement and word with surgical precision. "We've been waiting for your arrival," it continued, its voice cold and methodical. Trump kept his gaze fixed on the creature, crossing his arms as he often did when dealing with difficult executives. "Who are you, and what do you want with me?" he asked, his voice laden with natural authority. The reptilian tilted its head slightly, as if pondering the best way to respond. "We are the architects of many changes in your world," it said. "We have supported your species in critical moments, shaping decisions that ensured your ascension. And now we propose an alliance." The word alliance hung in the air, but to Trump, it felt more like a veiled threat. He knew how to recognize a risky deal when he saw one. "Alliance? With what?" "Creatures we don't even know where you're from." He tried to sound disdainful, but the curiosity in his voice was evident. The reptilian responded without hesitation. "We come from a place your species cannot yet comprehend. We are not enemies, Mr. President. We are silent allies who have been waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves." The words were calm, but there was something in the creature's tone that made Trump's skin crawl. The conversation took an even stranger turn when the reptilian extended one of its skeletal hands toward Trump. It held a small metallic device, shining with a pattern of pulsating lights. "This is the first step," it said. "A gift, technology that will allow your country and your leadership to dominate the world with unlimited, clean energy." Trump studied the device for a moment, his instincts screaming that it was more of a trap than a gift. "And what do you want in return?" he asked, not taking the object. The reptilian smiled, or at least made something resembling a smile. "Simply the guarantee that our presence will be protected and that you will be our interlocutor with humanity." Trump knew he was facing a unique opportunity, but also a colossal danger. He took a deep breath, considering all the implications. The promise of absolute power was tempting, but he hadn't reached his position by being naive. "Before any agreement, I want to know everything. No secrets, no omissions," he said, making it clear he wouldn't be manipulated. The reptilian leader nodded, seeming to appreciate the president's firmness. "Then come with us," it said, pointing to an even more imposing door on the side of the room. "It's time for you to see what's truly at stake." Trump followed the reptilians to the new room, his heart beating with a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. The heavy door slid open, revealing an environment even more impressive than the previous one. At the center of the room, on an elevated pedestal, was the device the reptilians had mentioned. It was small, no larger than a tablet, but its design looked like something out of a futuristic dream. Smooth, metallic surfaces pulsed with a pattern of lights that changed depending on the angle of view. The president approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the object. "So this is the technology that will change the world?" he asked, with a tone of skepticism barely concealing his curiosity. The reptilian leader responded calmly. "This device is merely a sample of what we can offer. It can extract unlimited energy from natural sources on your planet, in a way that is clean and invisible to current human methods. Imagine an economy where your nation no longer depends on fossil fuels or limited electricity. Imagine absolute control over this energy." The reptilian's words resonated deeply with Trump. He could already envision the headlines, strategic alliances, enemies reduced to obedience. "And what stops you from simply using this on your own?" he asked, crossing his arms. The creature stared at him, its eyes glowing faintly. "We prefer partnerships over confrontations. Humanity is not ready for a full revelation. You will be our intermediary, our point of access." Trump knew the power being offered was real, but he also knew every gift came with a price. "And what's the catch?" he asked, his voice low but full of intent. The reptilian moved closer, its physical presence becoming even more imposing. "All we ask is your cooperation and your guarantee that our operation here will remain secret. In return, you will have the resources to become the most powerful leader your world has ever known." The promise was tempting, but the creature's tone, so cold and calculated, made Trump suspect there was much more behind the offer. "You already have a plan, don't you?" he said, narrowing his eyes. The reptilian smiled with what seemed like approval. "Of course, Mr. President. We always have a plan. This is just the beginning. Our operations are already underway, but with your help, they can expand exponentially. You will have access to the most advanced technologies, to science that will redefine your species. But it will require sacrifices." The last word hung in the air like an unspoken threat. Trump felt a chill but didn't let it show. "Sacrifices like what?" he challenged, lifting his chin. The reptilian leader responded vaguely but ominously. Those who oppose progress always become obstacles. It is up to us to ensure they are adjusted. Trump knew he was dealing with something far greater than any political negotiation he had ever faced. He looked at the device again, feeling the weight of the decision he had to make. Accepting the gift meant stepping into unknown territory where he didn't have full control, but rejecting it meant passing up an opportunity that could place him on an unprecedented level of power. He reached out, touching the device carefully, feeling its cold, pulsating surface. The reptilian leader watched silently, waiting for his response. "I still don't trust you," Trump finally said, his eyes fixed on the creature. "But I'll accept, on one condition. I want access to everything. If you're entering my world, I'll know every detail." The reptilian's expression didn't change, but there was something in its eyes that indicated satisfaction. "As you wish, Mr. President. Your transparency will be guaranteed. Now prepare yourself, for much more needs to be revealed." With that, the room's lights intensified and a new door opened. Trump felt as though he was about to cross another threshold, a point of no return. The device was still in his hands, a symbol of both promise and danger. He knew the world was about to change, but he couldn't yet predict how catastrophic that change would be. As he stepped through the new door, Trump felt an unexpected chill in the air, almost as if he had entered a cryogenic chamber. The space that unfolded before him was vast, much larger than he expected, with endless rows of metallic structures resembling capsules. Each of them glowed with a greenish light similar to what had illuminated the previous corridors, but more intense and unsettling. Trump took a few hesitant steps, approaching the nearest capsule, while the reptilian leader followed closely. "What is this?" he asked, his voice slightly hoarse, as though the weight of what he was seeing was compressing his throat. The reptilian remained silent for a few seconds, allowing Trump to absorb the scene before responding. "These are our guarantees," it finally said, its voice heavy with an unsettling calm. Trump narrowed his eyes, leaning in to observe the inside of the capsule more closely. Submerged in a luminous, bioluminescent liquid was a human body. It was a male figure, with features that seemed familiar, but its face was obscured by a translucent mask connected to tubes extending to the top of the capsule. "You're storing people?" Trump asked, his voice now filled with a mix of horror and incredulity. "These humans have been carefully selected," the reptilian leader explained. "They are in a state of suspension, neither alive nor dead, but ready to be used when necessary." The words echoed through the room, heavy with implications. Trump turned to face the creature, his face now displaying restrained fury. "Used? How exactly?" He knew he was dealing with a force beyond his understanding, but the concept of people being turned into tools disgusted him. The reptilian tilted its head slightly, as if pondering the best way to explain. "These bodies can house us. They are vessels, prepared so that we can operate in your world without raising suspicion." The revelation hit Trump like a punch to the gut. He stepped back, looking again at the endless rows of capsules. Each contained a human being, all appearing strangely calm, almost serene. "You're replacing people?" he asked, his voice now heavy with indignation. The reptilian shook its head slowly. "Only those who pose a threat to balance or who can be more useful with our presence. We are not destroyers, Mr. President. We are strategists. Every replacement is carefully planned to ensure no one notices." Trump knew he was facing something monstrous, but he also understood that the magnitude of the operation was far greater than he could have imagined. "And how long has this been going on?" he asked, crossing his arms as he tried to maintain composure. The reptilian smiled, or at least made something resembling a smile. "Decades," it replied. "Perhaps longer. We've been careful, always operating in the shadows. But now, with your help, we can expand and accelerate the process. Together, we can create a world where no nation dares challenge your leadership." The promise of absolute power was tempting, but the cost was something Trump was not yet willing to accept. Trump remained silent for a moment, observing the capsules with keen eyes. He knew he couldn't show fear or weakness, but he also knew that every decision he made from that moment on would be crucial. "I want to know more," he finally said. "I want to know who these people are and what exactly you plan to do with them. If I'm going to enter this game, I'll need all the cards in my hand." The reptilian nodded, seeming satisfied with the response. "All in good time, Mr. President. Now, there's something even more important you need to see." With that, it indicated another door at the back of the room, which began to open slowly, revealing an even more intense glow. The light emerging from the new room was blinding, forcing Trump to squint as he followed the reptilian leader. When his vision finally adjusted, what he saw left him speechless. It was a laboratory, but unlike any he had ever visited. Machines that seemed alive moved silently, and giant holograms projected images of genetic maps and human anatomical simulations. At the center of the room was a kind of chamber filled with translucent liquids and cables snaking across the floor like artificial veins. The reptilian leader stopped in front of a console, pointing to the projections. "Mr. President, now you will see the true potential of our alliance." Trump took a few steps closer, examining the holograms that displayed detailed genetic structures. Lines of alien codes merged with graphics he recognized as human. He wasn't a scientist, but he understood enough to grasp what was being proposed. "This is genetic manipulation," he said, his voice tinged with curiosity barely masking his unease. The reptilian tilted its head, as if acknowledging Trump's intelligence. "Precisely. We can enhance your body, your mind, and even prolong your life. You will become more than a human leader. You will be something transcendent." Trump crossed his arms, pondering the offer as he observed the equipment before him. It was evident the reptilians weren't bluffing. The possibilities of what they could do seemed infinite. "You think you can sell me this with a few promises?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "And why would I trust you to tamper with my body or anyone else's?" The reptilian approached, with an almost paternal posture. "Because we understand the limitations of your species and respect your leadership. Imagine, Mr. President, a world where you never have to fear disease, fatigue, or even death. With our help, you will be invincible." Despite the ambition those words stirred, Trump knew there were traps. He wasn't naive enough to accept such an offer without considering the risks. "And what exactly do you expect in return for this?" "No one gives something for free, especially beings who don't even belong to this planet," he said, narrowing his eyes at the reptilian. The creature didn't hesitate. "What we ask is simple. We need someone to help integrate our species with yours. You will be the face of this union, a mediator who ensures our plan meets no unnecessary resistance." Trump knew that unnecessary resistance was a euphemism for total control. He also realized the reptilians weren't interested in mere coexistence. "You're talking about something much bigger than an alliance," he said, his voice firmer. "You want to shape the entire world, and I'm just your tool for that." The reptilian leader nodded calmly, not denying the accusation. "Not a tool, Mr. President. A partner. Our success will be your success, and the future we build together will be something your species could never achieve on its own." Trump took a deep breath, looking again at the projections. He could feel the weight of the decision he had to make. If he accepted, he would gain power no leader in history had ever had, but at what cost? "I don't trust you," he finally said, his voice loaded with a determination the reptilian leader seemed to recognize. "But I won't ignore an opportunity. Before taking any steps, I want to see everything. I want proof that you're being sincere." The reptilian nodded slowly, almost as if expecting this response. "Very well. Prepare yourself, Mr. President. There's still much more for you to discover." Even after the reptilian's impressive promises, something within Trump began to grind like an overloaded engine. As he was led back to the surface of the White House, his mind raced. He could recognize a risky deal when he saw one, and nothing about the creature's behavior suggested their intentions were entirely altruistic. That night, alone in his quarters, he analyzed everything he had seen: the capsules, the genetic experiments, the device of unlimited energy. It was impossible to deny the magnitude of the power being offered, but the absence of clear answers disturbed him. His advisors, those who had participated in the initial meeting, now seemed different. They were quieter, their responses calculated and almost automatic. Trump noticed that their eyes didn't meet his for long, as if avoiding some kind of contact. He tried questioning them about their thoughts on the proposal, but received only vague and rehearsed answers. It was as if the experience in those underground rooms had altered something in them. Trump began to suspect that the neural echo mentioned by the reptilians was already in operation. Perhaps, he thought, it was already too late to maintain control over his own team. In the days that followed, his unease grew. During cabinet meetings, he noticed that even some of his most trusted allies seemed subdued, too aligned with decisions he had barely articulated. In particular, his chief of staff, a man who had always challenged him in discussions, now agreed without question. Trump tested his theory, suggesting deliberately controversial policies, and observed with growing discomfort the unanimous acceptance. He began to feel increasingly alone in a government that was supposed to be his. At night, Trump recalled the details of the capsules and the promises of genetic fusion. He couldn't ignore the reptilians' efficiency, but the cost of such efficiency haunted him. What were they really planning? Who else had they already replaced? These questions circled his mind like an invisible predator. He decided he needed to know more, but this time, he would do it without involving anyone from his team. He knew that if the reptilians already had influence over them, any attempt to act openly could be discovered. To maintain appearances, Trump feigned full interest in the alliance while discreetly beginning to devise his own strategies. He accessed highly encrypted communication channels, revisiting contacts he trusted from before his presidency. One such contact was Red, an old business acquaintance whose paranoia about conspiracies had made him almost inaccessible. If anyone can help uncover this, it's him, Trump thought. Thus, guided by his survival instincts, he began to plan a secret meeting. Trump's initial doubt had evolved into an unsettling certainty. He was not in control of the situation. The promises of absolute power came laden with a silent threat, and the reptilians were playing a game he was only beginning to understand. But unlike his advisors and subordinates, he still had his autonomy intact, and he intended to use it before it was too late. Trump knew the neural echo was key to the strange behavior he had been observing. Determined to understand how it worked, he requested a controlled demonstration from the reptilians. "If this is really part of our alliance, I want to see how you intend to use it," he said, using his negotiator's posture to mask his distrust. The reptilian leader readily agreed, as if eager to reassure him. "Of course, Mr. President. We will allow you to see the reach of our technology." The demonstration took place in an improvised facility on the outskirts of Washington. A room was set up with equipment that looked like a mix of antennas and medical instruments. A holographic screen displayed a map with bright points scattered across a nearby city. The reptilian leader explained that each point represented a group of people receiving subliminal transmissions. "We do not manipulate minds directly," it said. "We merely suggest ideas they are already predisposed to accept." Trump watched as the transmission was activated. The images on the screen changed to show real people in their natural environments: offices, busy streets, their own homes. Initially, nothing seemed different. But as the minutes passed, Trump noticed subtle changes. Conversations became calmer, movements more orderly. In a live-recorded interview, a reporter who had been harshly critical of the government suddenly softened his tone. "Is this what you want?" Trump asked, his voice heavy with irony. "A country of obedient robots?" The reptilian leader responded with its characteristic calm. "Stability is necessary for progress. Human chaos is the greatest obstacle to your own evolution. With the neural echo, we ensure the right decisions are made." Trump clenched his teeth, feeling his anger grow. He knew that while this technology was efficient, it undermined everything that made humanity what it was. But he had to control himself. He couldn't reveal his true emotions there. Back at the White House, Trump began noticing the effects of the neural echo, even within his inner circle. Advisors who had previously advocated conflicting interests now seemed to agree with him almost robotically. He began to suspect the neural echo had been adjusted to work specifically within the White House, ensuring that everyone who came into contact with the reptilians was immediately subdued. In a tense confrontation, Trump called his chief of staff for a private conversation. "I want answers. You've been acting strange," he said, staring the man down. But instead of providing a clear response, the chief merely shook his head and said something that left Trump even more uneasy. "The alliance is for the greater good, Mr. President. That's what matters." The vague, almost hypnotic response was enough to confirm his suspicions. He was surrounded, and his own team had become an extension of reptilian control. Trump knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't trust anyone around him, but he also couldn't risk making rash moves. He began using a secret phone, kept off official networks, to establish contact with his old friend Red. "I need your help," he said, his voice low. "They're everywhere. I can't trust anyone else." Red, with his usual paranoia, responded immediately. "You should have left when you had the chance. But don't worry, I've got something that might help." Trump's isolation was total. He could barely sleep, burdened by the constant surveillance and the growing sense that he was being pushed into decisions that weren't his own. He knew time was running out. Each day that passed meant the reptilians deepened their roots in his government and possibly humanity as a whole. But he still had an ace up his sleeve, his ability to strategize, even when the odds were against him. He began formulating a plan. He knew that to regain control, he needed to destroy the neural echo's influence and expose the reptilian operations to the entire world. But doing so without alerting his allies would be the greatest challenge of his life. He only had one chance, and everything depended on what Red could deliver. Under the pretense of a diplomatic trip to resolve trade issues, Trump managed to leave the White House without attracting much attention. He left behind his usual security team and discreetly arranged to travel to the Mojave Desert. The journey was marked by a silence that reflected his determination. He needed answers, and Red was his only hope. The destination was an isolated facility, hidden in the middle of barren mountains, surrounded by antennas and metallic structures that looked straight out of a science fiction movie. When Trump arrived, Red was waiting at the entrance, his skeletal figure dressed in worn-out clothes. "I thought you'd never come," Red said, with a tone that mixed sarcasm and relief. Trump wasted no time on pleasantries. "They're surrounding me, Red. I'm sure they're using alien technology to manipulate everyone around me. I need something to fight back." Red led him inside the complex, where a vast network of computers and improvised equipment sprawled across every corner. "Your aliens aren't as smart as they think. I've already been monitoring strange signals in the government's frequencies." Trump watched as Red displayed pulsating graphs on a screen. "This," Red pointed out, "is the neural echo. They're transmitting subliminal messages in waves that manipulate human behavior. I've already pinpointed the exact frequency and created something to neutralize it." He showed a small portable device, no bigger than an old radio. "It's targeted interference. It'll shut down the neural echo in nearby areas for a short period. But this won't solve the entire problem, Trump. It'll just buy you time." Trump took the device, studying it carefully. "How much time do I have?" Red hesitated before answering. "Minutes, maybe. And if they notice, they'll know exactly where the interference came from." Trump nodded, knowing he was risking everything. "That's enough. I need to expose what's happening before they finish surrounding me." Red didn't seem convinced. "You still don't understand who you're dealing with. These reptilians aren't just manipulators. They play the long game, and they won't let you slip away so easily." Despite the warnings, Trump was determined. He thanked Red and prepared his return to Washington. The device was secure in his possession, and the plan was beginning to take shape. He knew the first step was to disrupt the neural echo within the White House, freeing the minds of his closest advisors and allies. With the alien influence temporarily disabled, he could gather evidence and bring it to the public. It was a risky gamble, but Trump had no other choice. As he drove back to the plane, Trump looked up at the starry desert sky. He felt a wave of uncertainty, as if standing on the edge of an unknown abyss. He trusted no one but his own determination. If the reptilians thought they could control him, they were about to discover they had underestimated the wrong adversary. Upon returning to the White House, Trump wasted no time. Using Red's device, he programmed a targeted disruption that would affect the entire West Wing. He waited for the right moment, activating the device during a meeting with his advisors. As soon as the device went into operation, he heard a faint buzzing, followed by an almost immediate change in the behavior of those around him. Some began blinking repeatedly, as if waking from a dream. Others seemed confused, their voices hesitant and full of doubt. "Mr. President," one of his advisors said, his voice trembling. "What? What's happening? I feel like I'm waking up from something." Trump saw the panic spread through the room. He realized the neural echo had left many of them in a trance state, and now, without the alien control, they were trying to piece things together. "You were being manipulated," Trump said, his voice firm but controlled. "The reptilians were controlling your minds to ensure you followed their orders. But that ends now." As his advisors regained their consciousness, Trump began organizing his team to act. He ordered them to gather documents, recordings, and any tangible proof of the reptilian presence. Some of the most disturbing information came from secret files that had been hidden in systems previously inaccessible to humans. Images of the capsules, videos of experiments, and communications between reptilians and high-ranking officials started to pile up. But the disruption didn't go unnoticed. Within minutes, security systems began sounding alarms. Trump knew the reptilians had detected the neural echo's failure. He prepared for the inevitable confrontation. "They'll come after me," he told one of his trusted advisors. "But we need to keep this evidence safe. If I don't survive, make sure the world knows what happened." He was determined to ensure the truth was revealed, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Meanwhile, the reptilians began taking measures to contain the damage. Trump received a ciphered message on his monitor. "You crossed the line. This alliance can no longer be maintained." He felt a chill run down his spine. Their next move would be direct and lethal. He only had one chance to complete his plan before it was too late. Trump gathered his most trusted allies, now free from the neural echo, and explained the situation. They needed to broadcast the evidence immediately, exposing everything to the world's media channels. "If the world knows," he said, "they won't be able to continue operating in the shadows." With that, he prepared his final move, a broadcast of emergency transmissions that would reveal the alien conspiracy in shocking detail. The air in the White House felt heavier than ever. Alarms blared everywhere, and the corridors were in complete chaos. Trump remained resolute in the Oval Office, surrounded by advisors who had regained their lucidity after the neural echo disruption. He knew the reptilians wouldn't stand idly by. As his staff worked to compile the final pieces of evidence and prepare the global broadcast, the tension in the room was palpable. Then the double doors of the Oval Office burst open, revealing two imposing figures. They looked human, but their eyes betrayed their origin, reptilians in disguise. "You violated our pact," said the figure leading the pair. Its voice was cold, almost mechanical, with a tone that seemed to echo beyond the physical environment. "We gave you a unique opportunity, and you chose to betray us." Trump, seated behind his desk, rose slowly, trying to project the confidence he felt slipping away. "I didn't betray anyone. You lied. You think you can manipulate humanity as you please, but that ends now." His words were firm, but he knew he was facing something far beyond his comprehension. The reptilians stepped closer, and Trump noticed a change in the air, as if an invisible pressure was trying to crush him. He felt his body weaken, an oppressive force invading his muscles. "You don't understand what's at stake," said the reptilian, its eyes glowing with an almost hypnotic intensity. "Your species needs us. Without our guidance, you're nothing but chaos." Trump took a deep breath, trying to resist the fainting sensation overtaking him. "You underestimated humanity," he replied, his voice now filled with anger. "And you underestimated me." At that moment, one of his advisors discreetly activated the emergency transmission system, uploading the files that exposed the experiments, capsules, and plans for reptilian manipulation of the government. The images began streaming to major news channels and social media platforms worldwide. The reptilians realized what was happening and launched a direct attack, but Trump was prepared. He pressed a hidden button under the desk, activating a high-tech containment field that Red had helped design. The field enveloped the reptilians, immobilizing them temporarily. "You think you can control everything, but you don't control the truth," Trump said, staring at the creatures as the broadcast continued. The world now saw the capsules, the grotesque hybrids, and the subliminal messages the reptilians transmitted through the neural echo. It was a direct blow to the alien plan. However, Trump knew this initial victory wouldn't be enough to defeat them completely. The reptilians, even while contained, smiled. "Truth is just a tool. You humans believe what you want to believe," said the leader before an internal explosion disabled the containment field. The creatures escaped, vanishing in seconds. Trump knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had been warned, but the war against the reptilians was far from over. The transmission had reached billions within minutes. Television networks, digital platforms, and even local broadcasts were flooded with the evidence Trump and his team had gathered. Images of the capsules, the grotesque hybrids, and recordings of secret meetings with the reptilians were impossible to ignore. The revelation shook governments worldwide. Leaders began issuing emergency statements as the public demanded answers. Protests and riots began forming in various cities, fueled by panic and outrage. Trump, for his part, used the exposure as an opportunity to regain control. He went on national television, with a demeanor mixing determination and exhaustion, to address the American people. "You've seen the truth," he said, looking directly at the camera. "They were among us, trying to manipulate us, using us as pawns in their game. But today we challenge them, and this is just the first victory." His words, though powerful, didn't erase the fact that the threat was still real. Meanwhile, within governments, the revelation caused internal chaos. Entire agencies were dismantled under suspicion of collaborating with the reptilians. High-ranking officials were arrested, and investigations began worldwide. Some governments outright denied the existence of the reptilians, accusing Trump of fabricating the evidence. Others, however, admitted they had long suspected extraterrestrial influence. Humanity was divided, but one thing was certain: the secret was out. Trump knew the battle didn't end with the exposure. He summoned scientists, strategists, and military leaders to begin planning a coordinated response against the reptilian influence. But the biggest challenge was psychological. The fear of alien presence eroded trust among people. Who was human? Who was a hybrid? The questions echoed everywhere as the world tried to grapple with the new reality. Meanwhile, reptilian underground bases began disappearing. Satellites captured images of sites being destroyed by internal explosions, as if the creatures were erasing their tracks. The message was clear: they hadn't given up, merely retreated to reorganize their plans. Trump knew this was the real danger, a threat that couldn't be seen or anticipated. Still, he refused to back down. "If they think they can erase us from history, they're wrong," he said in a meeting with top military leaders. "We'll hunt them down. We'll defeat them on their own terms. They started this, but we'll finish it." The words, spoken with force, concealed the fatigue of a man who knew his fight was just beginning. In the months following the exposure, the world underwent drastic changes. The reptilian alliance with humans had been broken, but the cost of the revelation was immense. Destabilized economies, divided societies, and widespread paranoia marked the new era. Trump became a polarizing figure. To some, a hero who challenged the impossible. To others, an opportunist who exposed humanity to even greater danger. At the White House, Trump continued to lead, but his circle of trust had shrunk drastically. The reptilians had disappeared from the surface, but he knew they weren't defeated. Reports of strange activities in remote regions of the planet kept coming in, suggesting they were regrouping. "They won't give up," Trump told a group of military leaders. "And neither will we." Meanwhile, scientists began studying the devices left behind by the reptilians, attempting to use alien technology to create defenses against future threats. But for every advancement, more questions arose. How much did humanity really understand about these beings? And what if they had been manipulating the game from the beginning? Even Trump, with his characteristic confidence, began to question whether the exposure had been a victory or merely the next step in a larger plan. The global population remained divided. Some believed the reptilians should be hunted to extinction. Others argued that peaceful coexistence was still possible, claiming not all reptilians were responsible for what had happened. This ideological conflict turned the planet into a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. In the end, Trump knew the greatest challenge would be keeping humanity united. He ended one of his most tense meetings with a phrase that would echo for years to come. "They may be hiding in the shadows, but now we know we're not alone." And that changes everything. Even so, when he looked at the horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Perhaps by the reptilians, perhaps by something even worse. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this mystery captivated you. But I bet you haven't seen everything yet. Click on the next videos now to continue your journey into the unknown. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next secrets I'm about to reveal. But be careful, once you step inside, there's no turning back.